But I said I have some unusual Marvel opinions, and as you'll soon find out, unusual opinions about movies in general as you see my Nicolas Cage lists unfold, because they are something.
Well, let's talk about some Nicolas Cage. So
let's get into it.
Yeah, so Cage, he's one of my all-time favorite actors, and I love that they finally came out. He finally addressed, like, hey, I've been doing these movies, but you know what? Like, even if they're not great, you know, I still try. And that's the one thing I will forever give him credit for is even if you go and do a movie that we'll talk about some, you're just like, hey, this movie blows. But you're like, you know what? He has given 110%, and God bless him.
He goes for it. And I can, in everything he's in, he really gives it his all. He is not a lazy actor in the least, and he's a very memorable actor. And has done a lot of memorable roles. And in looking at Nicolas Cage's massive filmography of like 125 movies, I came to realize how many Nicolas Cage movies I haven't seen, which is a lot. Yeah, I have a lot on my list that of his more some of his more well-known movies that I've managed to not see. Like, I've never seen Adaptation. I completely forgot that movie existed. And it seems like one that would be prime for this list. And I know it got a lot of critical regard when it came out. Red Rock West is another one I've always heard is really good. But some of his more dramatic roles.
Like yeah, it's one I've never been able to find a copy of. Him and Dennis Hopper, right? And Laura Flynn Boyle.
Yes, that's it. I think it was about 93. I think when it came out, and it's another one. One of his more toned down roles that he got a lot of acclaim for, and I'm sure it's just probably anything that looks toned down next to Dennis Hopper. It's like I can't imagine those two in a movie and it not being insane, but apparently it's a pretty normal movie. Because I wish we could have seen those two in a truly over the top movie when they were both still with us. Because man, those two guys are two peas in a pod right there. I know it's like
everywhere. It'd be amazing.
Can you imagine if Nicolas Cage had been in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? That's a fantasy booking right there. That didn't
make the list, but
that would, because that is one of my favorite Dennis Hopper roles for a variety of reasons. With his giant hat and the dual wielding chainsaws. Go see Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 if you haven't. It is so incredibly different from the first one, but it's a great movie. I love it. I love the direction they went. But I'm getting off on a tangent. This is about Nicolas Cage, and all that's somewhat related. So where would you like to start with our lists? Or is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? I'm sure we'll be reminiscing and thinking about a lot of things we've watched while we're going into this, but anywhere in particular you want to start?
I think no, I figure we will end with the fantasy booking stuff, but other than that, wherever you want to start, it's good with me.
I want to start with a good.
You want to start on a high or a low or high?
I want to start on a high note. Okay. I was going to put my top 5. I put top 5. These are my personal favorites and the ones I like the best. These are not objectively the best, and I won't try to claim they are. These are 5 that I think are good movies and really spoke to me. So nobody throw rocks at me or hunt me down or dox me. And all of these are my opinions, which are worthless. And if you ask me next week, my opinions are probably going to be different. But there is one movie that shows up repeatedly on this list, and I imagine it probably shows up in yours too, but we'll see. But so let's start with the top 5. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so we'll start at number 5. Honestly, it's the newest one, but Ashton and I went and watched it last week, and I love it. It's The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I know they talked about doing Daniel Day-Lewis, or there's another actor they wanted to do it. I'm like, you watching that movie, you can't do that movie without Cage. And it's kind of his big, like, nod to Nick Cage as Nick Cage. And it's, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend seeing it. It's so fun.
I have not. I'm
Definitely
shocked at how well it's done on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so, I compared it the most to like something like I know people would say like My Name is Bruce, but not, I don't think so. More like if you ever read or listened to the Bruce Campbell book, Make Love the Bruce Campbell Way, which if you haven't, you should. Because it's very much in that vein. But it was Ash, and the fact that he was all in it, because he, doesn't know anything about Nick Cage, but he dug it, and it's a good time. So it was honestly, like, we walked in a theater just smiling together, and so it's definitely worth the watch. I figured that'd be an easy way to start. You want to do your 5, or you want to do one and then the other one?
I'll do my number 5. My number 5 is an unconventional pick, but I think this is an underrated movie. I find this movie a lot more unsettling than most movies I've seen. It seems to be really rooted in a deep, grimy reality, and it's got a great supporting actor in it. My number 5 pick is 8mm. It's generally not considered one of his better movies, and it's a really seedy movie, but it did serve me in a way few movies do. And Joaquin Phoenix, of course, is his kind of his sidekick in the movie. I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember. It's a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. I can't remember who directed that, but it's got. It's just yes, that makes sense. It's this descent into hell and depravity, and just this fairly normal guy going deep into this horrible underworld to try to figure out the truth behind it. If y'all aren't familiar with 8mm, I believe it's the late 90s, early 2000s, where Nick Cage plays a private investigator trying to figure out the origins of a snuff film a guy left behind in his safe after he died. And you'll want to take a shower afterwards. But it's a very subdued role for Nicolas Cage for the most part. But it's just, you feel like you're going on this journey with him, and it's something else. It is not for all tastes. It is not a feel-good movie, but I think it's a pretty damn good thriller movie. All right, over to you with number 4.
Yeah, well, just to say, because it just missed my list, but I love 8mm. I think it's Andrew Kevin Walker's best script over 7. I mean, I love 7, but I think 8mm is the better written movie, and that movie is.
I agree. Yeah.
It's one of those, like, you gotta like make like a cold coffee, and you just like wrap yourself in a blanket when you're gonna watch that movie, because it is not. Whoo boy.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 4, we're also getting into weird dark Cage, and it's one that, again, that nobody talks about. I remember watching. I don't know if we watched it. I remember watching it in high school for sure. And that cover art will always be in my head. It's Bringing Out the Dead. It's one I think is lost, especially maybe because of Scorsese, or because it's not. He was coming off of the big. He had that weird stint in the late 90s. I think it's one of Scorsese's best. It's honestly, watching it is like watching Scorsese try to make a David Lynch movie. But he is so great in that movie, and it's weird watching him. He is almost playing the straight man in that movie, to the insanity going around, and whether it's Tom Sizemore or even Ving Rhames a little bit. So in the movie, Nicolas Cage plays a ambulance driver, and he can't sleep. Yeah, he had a patient die, and so he can't sleep. He can't focus, and you're just watching this man go insane, because he knows once he can save a life, he can sleep. And so just night after night, this graveyard shift of an ambulance driver in New York City, and all the weird, crazy characters that come to life, and all he wants to do is save a life. And you just, like I said, he is being uncaged Nick Cage, but he's also playing with characters like Tom Sizemore, who just looks like one big walking 8-ball, like he's just smacked out of his mind. And you have Ving Rhames playing like this really weird like guy who believes he's also kind of a faith healer as well as an ambulance driver. It's so bizarre. And there's it's got the actor oh my God, Curtis is his last name, from he's in the Meg, so I know all of you get to typing because you've all seen that. But it's not Tony Curtis. But it's a dark, weird, like I said, it feels like, for whatever reason, Martin Scorsese was like, I'm going to direct a David Lynch movie. But it is one that it stays with you long after it's over.
That is one I'll admit I've never seen. I was putting together thinking of top 5 lists of movies I really need to see of Nicolas Cage's afterwards. That's easily in my top 5. I'm not the biggest Scorsese fan, but he's immensely talented, and I've heard what a classic movie that is, and very against type for what Scorsese usually makes. So my number 4 is, this movie's kind of surprisingly low on my list, but there's so many Nicolas Cage movies I love, and that is Raising Arizona. That was one of the, I remember watching that all the time on cable growing up. It's kind of a hard movie to describe, but it's a wonderful this bonkers comedy, and it's surreal in parts, and Nicolas Cage as Hy McDonough is just wonderful. The whole movie is great. I got to introduce it to my wife a little while back, and she loved it. It's a stellar movie. And it's just, there's just a few more I like a little more, but that's the thing. You could rearrange this list and I wouldn't be upset except for number 1. But Racing Arizona is my number 4.
Well, I'm going to take everything you just said and I'm going to raise it in one number, because number 3 is Racing Arizona. It's one of the most bizarre comedies. Oh, Patrick, you want to be on screen? It's one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies. And I love him. And Holly Hunter, she's so great in that movie. As like I said, I showed it to Amber way back when we got married, but we introduced it to Ashton this first time before I did the review over it. And he, of course, he was like, "Oh, fine," but he loves John Goodman for some weird reason. But it's not a weird reason. He's a national treasure. But yeah, I love that movie. That weird, like sun-crusted hillbilly landscape the Coen Brothers create in that movie is so great. And every character in that movie is fantastic. Whether it's the weird kid behind the counter reading a copy of Jugs, or it's the actor who you've seen in a million things, like randomly like propositioning Nick Cage for a swinger party in the middle of the desert. It's so weird, but if you haven't seen Raising Arizona, you should. He's so great in it. It's such a great movie.
I love Randall Tex Cobb in that movie as the biker of the apocalypse. It's just such a random character in that movie, and I love it. It's just a testament to how many movies Nick Cage that I like. That as much as I love that movie, it's number 4. My number 3 is Wild at Hearts, one of my favorite David Lynch movies. An absolutely insane, excellent movie. His performance is just so out there in a snakeskin jacket, and Willem Dafoe's as Bobby Peru is just, oh man, it's another one. It's a hard movie to describe. It's a road movie. Another one, probably not one you want to watch with your parents, but it's a great movie. It's one of the more accessible David Lynch movies, I would say, too. Even though it gets crazy, really like baffling in parts. But been in love with that movie for a long time, so that's my number 3.
No, my number 2 is a real recent one, but I remember wanting to see it, never seeing it, and then when we finally, Amber and I watched it at the beginning of this year, and I was just floored. Is Pig. I went in kind of hearing the buzz that it was really good. Like, it surprised people how good it was. But like, I was just sitting here like just broken as a human being by the end of that movie. He is so, it's not, when you think Nick Cage, it's not the role you think, or you look at it and you think, okay, it's Nick Cage in a John Wick situation with a pig. But to be like the anti-John Wick movie, and just these moments of Nick Cage just acting his ass off. That scene, there's a scene where he is like talking to this chef in a very fancy diner for information, and he just crushes this dude with his voice barely above a whisper. It's just, and the movie it's him and then the kid from Hereditary. He's great in it. Like, it's just, I was like, it ended and I was just like, I can't. Like, I was just floored by Pig. It was one of the most beautiful movies I've seen in a long time.
I have not seen Pig or The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I have a feeling those both would have showed up on one of my lists. Those two I really have to watch, but I was shocked at just the reception of that movie and unanimously hearing it's a great movie. So I really look forward to watching that and seeing some of Nicolas Cage's dramatic acting chops. So my number two is...
He was snubbed at the Oscar.
That's the word, yeah. My number two is a movie I watched with my mom a lot growing up. It's one of my favorite romantic comedies. It's a wonderful, wonderful role by Nicolas Cage. And it's a very unusual screen couple that works. I'm talking about Moonstruck. I love Moonstruck. Nicolas Cage as an angry one-handed baker who gets involved with Cher is great. It takes place in Little Italy in New York City. And it's everyone involved. Cher and Nicolas Cage have great chemistry, and it's funny and has dramatic parts. And Nicolas Cage really like pours his soul out in the movie. You can really feel the pain his character has gone through, and just, but he's also, his character is so bold and blunt. I love it. If you have not seen Moonstruck, I highly recommend it. It's, given a lot of the rest of my movies that are on this list, it's kind of an unconventional choice, but partially because it holds such a special place in my heart due to it being one of my mom and I's favorite movies to watch together. I just love Moonstruck. I think it's an excellent movie.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love it. And I just imagine in my mind of just you and Pam watching the movie. It just makes me giggle. I love it. So we touched on it before, but there was no shock to this part of the list. My number one is Wild at Heart, and it's because that snake jacket represents my it's a symbol of my individuality and represents my belief in a personal freedom. That movie is wild, man. And it was, I think it was my first. No, I think, well, it's the best introduction to Lynch, I think. A lot of people say that or Blue Velvet. You got to go Wild at Heart. But man, and you want to talk about hot. Him and Laura Dern in that movie. This was one of the hottest movies you will see. Like, that movie just oozes sex and sweat. And yeah, Willem Dafoe is terrifying. And the weird stuff with like Harry Dean Stanton and like the weird voodoo cult, like it is still very David Lynch, but the Glinda the Good Witch shows up at one point. It's really bizarre, but between Cage and Dern and Diane Ladd too, like that, she is off her rocker in that movie, and it's terrifying and amazing to watch. It's just my favorite. Like, you watch that. That's the one I always tell people about, especially if you get somebody younger and they're like, Nicolas Cage, I'm like, no, listen. Go watch Wild at Heart. tell me you don't want a snakeskin jacket and just be like doing flips off your convertible in the desert and just going nuts. Stay away with guys with baby teeth. But no, Wild at Heart's my number one. I love that movie. It's up there with my favorite of Lynch's movies, and his performance in that movie is it's when you can do unbridled Cage correctly. And I think that movie catches the unbridled Cage masterfully.
I always think of that scene when they're by the side of the road and they both scream "Power Mad" and start dancing. It's like their favorite metal band. It's one of those really random parts. And then when they run across that wreck in the desert with I can't remember what her name is. She was another David Lynch stuff, and her like brains are hanging out. It's just like that movie's really unsettling in parts. But you were right. They had, white hot chemistry. And it's funny because neither one of them are known as being these very sexy actors necessarily, but whew, man, it gets steamy, and it's
that
great.
is one of the sexiest movies ever. That movie is super sexy.
I'd agree. It's just like the dialogue between those two. It is steamy as all get out. Way more so than a lot of the other erotic thrillers of that era. But yes, we can move on to talking about how steamy that movie is, but steamy. My number one is a movie that knocked my socks off. That in terms of music, visuals, performances, and the sheer audacity of it, it was my favorite movie of that year. And my number one pick by a landslide is Mandy. I love Mandy. I believe Mandy came out in 2018. That is a bonkers movie. The same director as Beyond the Black Rainbow. It's a visual treat. I love all the colors. I love the way it's shot. Basically, the movie is about Nicolas Cage has to go on a mission of revenge to try to get his girlfriend back that has been kidnapped by a cult. So he gets on a lot of drugs, forges an awesome battle axe, and goes on a rampage. It is a ball-to-the-wall Cage performance. It's a wildly entertaining movie, and very few movies have mesmerized me like Mandy has. If you haven't seen it, absolutely go see it. It is peak Nicolas Cage, and it is an awesome movie. It's not for all tastes, but I wouldn't change a thing. I love Mandy. I think it's awesome, and there's nothing else quite like it. So that's my number one by a landslide is Mandy.
Yeah, I love Mandy. It's definitely one where I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. Watch this. What do you mean you don't like it? But not to put her on blast. Don't put her on blast. It's okay to not like a movie. But no, I that movie's so great, and we'll get to the character of Red Miller later, but that movie is I think that's the closest I've ever come to ever being on drugs is that movie, because it is a wild ride. Well, we've talked about the best. Do we want to go ahead and dip our toes in some of the lesser Cage?
Yes,
a whole
we
bunch
can.
of what's going on here.
Oh, I have the computer, so I'm actually able to follow along the chat now. Justin, stay tuned in about a movie you just mentioned, because it'll probably come up in my lists. So, I can start out with the bottom five here. One of mine is kind of a cop-out, but you'll see what I'm getting at. There's a lot of movies to choose from, because Nicolas Cage, especially in recent years, has been in some pretty terrible movies. But I was interested to see some of his terrible movies that have been forgotten. My number five is one he was involved in the production of, and I think the writing, as well as having a bit part as a character named Acid Yellow, and that's 2002's Sunny, starring James Franco. It is bad. It is one of those, they're trying to go for some sort of award bait, and it's just creepy and it just doesn't work on any level. James Franco is a gigolo, and comes back from Vietnam and antics ensue. I don't know quite what they were going for. It's just not good. It's awkward and bad, and yeah, I don't know if anyone else remembers that, but that's like, how did this, how did I never hear of this movie? There's a good reason. It sucks.
Yeah. Okay. So my number 5 is a total cop out, and it is a bad movie. It's a bad movie, but Nicolas Cage is I think it's the one that pushed that Nick Cage meme over the edge. Unfortunately, I kind of wish there was a little more of it, but it's The Wicker Man, because I knew nothing about it going in. I bought it on DVD and watched it and was like, oh no. Because I just recently seen the original. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Okay, all right. And then watched it and like, well, Nick Cage is great. Bees aside, but I could take a whole movie Nick Cage just as a bear punching people. But like the whole movie just to be like, ugh, women are the worst. Was a weird tone to take on that movie, but it's a fun movie. It's a guilty pleasure, so that's why I put it at 5. Because the rest of these I really don't like at all. But we had to talk about Wonder. We had to talk about Wicker Man.
He punches a lot of women in that movie. It's like, yeah, the whole, that's a bizarre movie. And it feels like whoever wrote that was really mad after a breakup or something. But at least it has entertainment value. Somebody cut together The Wicker Man as a comedy trailer on YouTube, and that's one of the funniest videos I've ever seen. But my number 4, moving on, is, I think, a generic blockbuster that I watched this on bootleg when I was in Iraq, and I had a roommate who really thought it was great, and I was kind of baffled. I remember we watched Screamers, Pacific Heights, and movie Next, and he was like, "Oh, that movie's so great." Then went about bashing Screamers and Pacific Heights. Dude had awful taste in movies, but it's about Nick Cage that can kind of tell the future, and I can't remember her name from Seventh Heaven, who he has zero chemistry with, and it's a boring, forgettable movie. I think it's 2007. Yeah, Next. Part of my own personal, just like turned off because my roommate loved how good of a movie it was, but it is not a memorable movie. It is not a good movie.
All right. So my number 4 is one that I wasn't mad at. I was just disappointed because I felt like this should have been better, but I just ended up hating it, and that's Knowing. For 2/3 of that movie, I'm fine with it, and then the third act comes, and I was just like, no, not having it. And it's again just one of those movies where you're like, Alex Proyas, do you not remember the early 90s? Could you do that again? Give me a Crow. Give me a Dark City. Stop it. But I know some people do like Knowing, but I couldn't. I just did not like that movie. That third act killed it for me. Him and Rose Byrne are good in it, but I couldn't do it. Like
That very nearly made my list because I'm with you. The ending and how that unfolds and the reveal is just awful. I didn't hate it quite as much, but it's not great. My number 3 is, I think, a very strangely cast movie, and this is part of the pre-MCU comic book movie era. I think it's just got some bizarre casting, especially Nicolas Cage as Johnny Blaze in Ghost Rider. I liked it when it first came out, sort of. Going back and watching it, it holds up in no way at all. He doesn't have chemistry with Eva Mendes. What's his name? I can't remember. Wes something as Blackheart is one of the worst villain castings ever. And I think one of the soul redeeming. There's two things I like. One, you have Sam Elliott as the cowboy Ghost Rider. I like that. and Peter Peter Fonda as Mephistopheles. I thought those were both well cast. Otherwise, I think it's a really crappy comic book movie. I actually think the second one is more entertaining because they just wham with it and made the stupidest movie they could. And I think it works better. But Ghost Rider doesn't hold up. It is not a good movie at all.
No, I agree. Like, hang on, there we go. It's one of those movies where you're like, how did you give that guy that and Daredevil? Because like that, and then that guy went off to obscurity. But yeah, that first one, yeah, I think the best part is you're like, hey, I love Sam Elliott, and he's a cowboy. Peter Fonda's the devil in this motorcycle movie. That's fun. But otherwise, like, even Donald Lowe is wasted in that movie. Like, and that's the CG is bad. Like it is not good.
No, it's
I'm gonna see we're the same page. So my number 3 is one of these newer secret Nick Cage movies where they all just kind of drop on Netflix all of a sudden when you're scrolling through. And it was one that seemed interesting because of the character he plays. This is a very Seagal-esque movie, later Seagal-esque movie, and it's Primal. Because it's a movie where Nicolas Cage is he's like a big cat smuggler, and he's on a boat. He's the villain, and so I'm like, okay, Nick Cage is playing the villain. That's interesting. And then you realize, oh no, like terrorists take over the boat, and he's only going to be in it for another 10 minutes total because it's somebody else's movie, and they just paid to put Nick Cage on the poster. He does have an epic beard in that movie. And I feel like it was like he was like, I'm not playing Joe Exotic, but I'll do this stupid big cat movie. But it is not good. And you're like, oh, it's Nick Cage as a villain, and he's a big cat hunter. Whatever, I'm here for this. And then you realize, oh no, I've been bamboozled. It's not that. It's they got me. They got me.
My number 2 is Logan just mentioned it. It is the Left Behind, the one that doesn't have Kirk Cameron in it. Never seen that one. I don't think it could be a lot worse. I don't know why he decided to take that movie. It's terrible and boring. A lot of these super religious movies are, but this one's it's criminally boring and terrible. And it's one of those, based off the source material, I think it could be done somewhat well, but it never will. And Left Behind is, it was, talk about bizarre casting as Nicolas Cage as Rayford Steele. And no, it's bad. And Chad Michael Murray's in it too for reasons. So, Left Behind.
So with my number 2, it's funny because I also would have rather been Raptured because Left Behind is my number 2. Because that movie sucks. It sucks so bad. For everything you just said, you're like, okay, Nick Cage is an airplane pilot in this movie about the rapture. Whatever, it can be done well, and it's the most boring movie. It's just, I don't know how you could make this end of the world apocalypse scenario dull, but that movie finds a way to do it. It's so bad. And he's got a terrible
My number 1
movie too.
Oh man, you are not kidding. When it's questionable whether Kirk Cameron is in the better movie than you know you've done something wrong. My number 1 is the cop-out because my number 1 is pretty much all post-financial problems Nicolas Cage straight to Redbox movies. There are a lot of them. So many of them. You see at Redbox or Netflix, like, oh, when did that come out? It straight to streaming, straight to DVD, and maybe there are a few gems in the bunch. Most of them I've seen are really bad, and so it's a multi-way tie for first place for most of these straight to streaming or DVD. Nicolas Cage movies in the past 7 or 8 years. And I know it's kind of a cop out, but how could I pick just one out of those?
No, I did pick one, and again, it's for reasons. My number one is kind of a recent one, and it's called Jiu-Jitsu. Now, if I was to say to you, you have Nicolas Cage, you have Tony Jaa, and a Predator knockoff, sign me up. But again, we've been bamboozled because Nick Cage is in the movie for like maybe 20 minutes as kind of like a flashback ghost character, and Tony Jaa is just kind of milling about and shows up every once in a while, so he like gets to keep his SAG card. And the effects of the Predator creature are terrible. He looks like Zordon in a mech suit. It's a waste of time. It was so bad. I was so angry because you have this great, again, Nicolas Cage, Tony Jaa, Predator knockoff. That should have been easy base hit, and they screwed it up so bad.
How could they not make a fun movie out of that? I mean, really, that's appalling. I've not seen Jiu-Jitsu. I was actually considering watching it, but I think under the recommendation will pass. If you think it's the worst Nicolas Cage movie, that's pretty damning, I'd say.
Yeah.
There's
just not
a few
enough.
others on the list.
It's not enough.
A few others on the list that were in contention were Firebirds, which is basically Top Gun with helicopters. It's Nicolas Cage or Tommy Lee Jones, and I also was looking at putting G-Force on there, that hamster movie or whatever, or gerbil movie. But that one, I mean, that's kind of low-hanging fruit right there. So I decided to leave those both off the list. But those were, I have notes on my page here for others that were in contention. So
yeah.
So I think after that, we should move on to our most underrated.
Okay.
I think Nicolas Cage has made a lot of underrated movies. And actually, some of you all have mentioned some. Again, some unconventional picks for my part here. But we'll start out with number 5 would be, just for you, Justin, It Could Happen to You, which is a great rom-com from the 90s with Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda and Rosie Perez, among others, about a cop who wins the lottery and shares it with a waitress. There's more to it than that, but I really love the way it's shot. I think it's Isaac Hayes is in it as kind of a narrator. It's a really great, heartfelt movie, and I feel it's one a lot of people sleep on.
All right, so my number 5 is, it's funny because it's a deep cut. It has the nostalgia factor like Moonstruck does for you. And also, they like super referenced it in the new Nick Cage movie, which is like, when they went deep. And it's when I used to watch with my grandma all the time. It's Guarding Tess. Nicolas Cage is like this. He's like this real uppity Secret Service agent, and he has to protect this old. I can't remember if she's the first lady or she's like the mother of the president. She's this old biddy, and so you have Nick Cage playing off this old biddy. And my grandmother absolutely loved that movie. And it's one like the minute they name dropped it in the new movie, I was like it immediately just took me back to watching it at her house. I haven't seen it since then. But just hearing the title of it in that new movie just immediately put that memory in my brain. And so I had to put it on this list because it is one that nobody talks about.
Yeah, Logan pointed out it's actually Guarding Tess, isn't it? Or is it Driving Tess?
What did I say?
You said
Guarding Tess.
You said Driving Tess?
Wrong. You're right. I was thinking of the wrong crotchety old white lady movie.
My number 4 is actually a pretty recent movie. I took my daughter to see it because she's a big fan of the show, and it was way funnier and better written than I thought it would be. That's Teen Titans Go to the Movies. It's actually hilarious. Everyone in the family, everyone in the theater adults and children alike were laughing at it because it's got a lot of great jokes and it actually has some shockingly dark parts in it. Nicolas Cage voices Superman, which is his successful attempt at playing Superman in a movie. I'm not a huge fan of the show. I think the movie was really well done, and I had a lot of fun watching it. I think it's one a lot of people sleep on just due to the silly source material, but I really like Teen Titans Go to the Movies.
Yeah. I didn't think about the animated movies and stuff like him and that and him in Spider-Verse, but yeah, no, Ashton loves the show, or did at the age, and I did like the movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. My number 4 is one of those weird like gems that you do find in like these straight to Redbox movies. And I think it's just because of him and the other actor in it. It's The Frozen Ground. It's him and John Cusack, and it's the story of Robert Henson, the serial killer who would like fly women up to like uncharted farmland in Alaska and hunt them for sport. And Nick Cage plays the FBI agent trying to hunt him down, he's like a highway patrolman or something. And John Cusack actually plays Robert Hansen, and they are just like trying to out-chew each other in the scenery, but it's still like a really pretty good procedural true crime drama. And it's one like you just see the cover and you're like, I don't, what? But once you kind of hear the true story about the guy, if you see the guy's face and you follow true crime, you'll recognize him. John Cusack really does look nothing like him except for the glasses they have him in. But it's just him and John Cusack going toe to toe as good guy, bad guy in this movie. Yeah, it's everywhere. Like it's streaming on like every platform, but it's one I finally just sat down. I was like, I'll watch it to get some more Nick Cage, and I was really surprised by how well I liked it.
That's one. I assumed it was another awful straight to streaming movie, so I'd never given it a chance, but I had no idea what it's about. That actually sounds pretty compelling. So, and I love John Cusack, and I love Nicolas Cage, so sounds like a winner. My number 3 is another recent movie. I think it's gotten a decent amount of hype, but I think people sleep on precisely how good it is and how much it captures the terror of H.P. Lovecraft, and that's Color Out of Space. I was so impressed by how well they made that movie unsettling and capturing the themes of the original story. And as I said, capturing H.P. Lovecraft on screen. I love Lovecraft movies. It's hard to do. I really think they nailed it. There were some parts of that movie towards the end that were just, I was pretty shocked in parts. Again, that is not a cheery movie, but I think it's one of the better Lovecraft adaptations, and I think it deserves a lot more hype than it's gotten.
For sure. No, we'll come back to that color. My number 3 is a movie that I just saw recently, and it was on your list, Logan, and I really did love it. It's Joe. Like again, if you see this like cover, there's just Nick Cage. He's dressed like a lumberjack. He's got a beard, and you're like, I could not care less. But then you watch it, and it's him and Lemon Face from Ready Player One. I can't remember the actor's name. But it's a really good movie. Like kind of like a lesser version of it would be that new movie that came out with Justin Timberlake, where he takes care of the little boy who's possibly trans, and he like has to be violent in order to protect this child, and that's the way this movie kind of works with this kid's abusive father and the character of Joe having this prison past and trying to keep his violent nature in check, but also is going to protect this kid at all costs, even if it means going back to jail. And he gives a great performance in it. Again, it's one I had not seen, and by the cover you wouldn't watch it, but he is great in it. It's a really good, like a dad movie. Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah, Paul, like I said, it's the kind of movie, but Joe is heads and shoulders above it.
Joe is another one I haven't seen, but that's one I've been meaning to check out. I'm looking forward to checking that one out. Again, unanimous praise for it. Well, my number two is a stupid movie, but it's a really fun movie. It's an action-packed movie. It's absolutely ridiculous, but if you're just looking for a good, fun time, you shut your brain off and enjoy, watch Drive Angry. I unabashedly love Drive Angry. I'm not saying it's a great movie, but it is absolutely absurd. Nicolas Cage escapes from hell to rescue his grandchild and has to fight through cult members and all sorts of stuff. There's a incredibly weird and wild sex scene in it, and Amber Heard's in it. I know she's not terribly popular right now, but it's just you watch it for Nicolas Cage and how bonkers it is. So, oh, there you are. I will not say it's a good movie. It's not, but man, is it fun.
I adore Drive Angry. It's so weird. Like it's so Grindhouse. It's more Grindhouse than the Grindhouse movie. It's just, man, it's just a sit down and smile for 90 minutes at how ridiculous this movie is. It's so good. So my number two is Color Out of Space. Yeah. Like you said, H.P. Lovecraft is very difficult to capture, and even the best H.P. Lovecraft's adaptations are movies where they just blindly have to rework Lovecraft's style, whether it's Reanimator or From Beyond. And I know that he's had a lot of trouble since this came out. So I don't know if it'll ever happen, but for Richard Stanley, especially if you've seen Lost Souls, seen that documentary about him going nuts on the set of The Isle of Dr. Moreau, to have him just kind of come back with this amazing, horrifying adaptation of Color Out of Space. I do hope that we eventually do get the other H.P. Lovecraft adaptations he wanted to do, because whatever the man's problems he's had, between Hardware, which is great, and the Dust Devil, which I recently watched, which I really enjoyed, and then Color Out of Space, he's a very visual, amazing filmmaker, and I would love to see him do some of those. He's proven with that movie that he could tackle some of those stories. Maybe not the big ones like In the Mountains of Madness, but an Innsmouth horror I'd be interested, or Dunwich horror. One of those, I would love to see what he would do with the H.P. Lovecraft. And Nicolas Cage is great in it. Again, it's a movie like Mandy or like Wild at Heart. It knows when to let Cage off the leash and just capture the lightning of it. Like it's great. It's absolutely incredible.
Well, my number one is a movie that is not the last time this will come up on the list, and that's Mandy, because I think everyone should watch that movie because it's awesome. It's instant cult classic. I love Mandy. I could talk for a long time about it. I'll end it there and back over to you for your number one.
Well, we've talked about my number one. It's 8mm. Again, it's one of those late 90s Cage movies that nobody talks about, but I think it's I think it's one of Schumacher's best. I think he directs the hell out of that movie. I mean, yeah, The Lost Boys is number one probably, but I think this is in contention as one of his best movies. Again, I think it's Andrew Kevin Walker's best script, as much as I love Seven, and it's just this. It's so gross, and yet you can't look away from the movie. And it's not only Cage, it's James Gandolfini as the very or kind of early prototypical Harvey Weinstein, it turns out, or Peter Stormare, or even the actor who plays Machine.
Machine.
Yeah, like that movie is just, the fact that movie got made and got released as wide as it did, man. That movie it's dark and it's gross, but man, you're in it from the very beginning, and it doesn't let go. It's a wild ride.
But I don't know why they didn't make my top 5 list, because I agree. It's extremely underrated. It's one of those, people talk about Seven and other 90s dark thrillers like that, but it's right up there with them. The whole seedy journey is just so disturbing. And they just pulled it off so well. It's probably Joel Schumacher's best work, but I'd agree, very underrated. So continuing on, let's go for, we have best Cage characters, correct? Or do we just have craziest?
Yeah, best characters. Yeah, I got that one. You want to do best or craziest first?
We'll do best and then move on to craziest. I think that'll be a fun order.
Okay.
My number five is another animated children's movies, but I really love Nicolas Cage in it. I love his character, and I think his voice work adds a lot to the character, and that's Grug from The Croods. I love The Croods, both of them, and I think he was a great choice to play this overprotective caveman. There's probably better roles that should make my top 5, but I just love that character so much. I watched them both many times, and I think a big reason those succeed so well is because of Nicolas Cage. That's my number 5.
Oh yeah, no, I've never seen The Croods, but everybody talks about The Croods. They love The Croods, and they do even make like some pretty good Croods jokes in that new one. Like he talks about The Croods as kind of being what everybody loves him in, but I need to watch him. My number 5 is a character in a movie that I unapologetically love, and I love it in a way because, number 1, I know absolutely dick about automobiles, and I've never seen a Fast and Furious movie, but I unashamedly love Gone in 60 Seconds, and that's his character, Memphis Reigns. Ember and I will do this all the time when we're trying to like talk to each other, and he's got that terrible like dye job, but that's a fun movie. It's to me, it's one of the fun. We went through this weird phase in the late 90s, early 2000s of like heist films. And I know everybody loves Ocean's 11, but give me Gone in 60 Seconds. I love that movie. And he's
as a long time.
Him and no, go ahead. I'm done.
I love that movie. I've watched it many times as a longtime car guy. I grew up in a junkyard and whatnot. I love all the cars in that movie. It's what a fun cast. Angelina Jolie is great in it, and it's so much fun. And Nicolas Cage, it's not who I would have picked for the role, but I couldn't see anyone else in that role at the same time. Man, what a fun movie. And he really holds that movie together and makes it work. Even shining above the rest of the cast, which it's got a pretty damn great cast, too. So I love Gone in 60 Seconds. My number 4 is I believe it's the role he earned his Academy Award for, if I'm not mistaken. It's a kind of a hard-to-watch movie at times, but Ben Sanderson in Leaving Las Vegas, playing this absolute crippling alcoholic who goes to Las Vegas with the goal to drink himself to death. It's a powerful performance, and it's one of those I recommend watching it. It really shows how good he can be as a dramatic actor. I'm playing somebody who's at that late stage of alcoholism and it's just so far gone. That wasn't easy to do, but man, he nailed it.
No, I agree. My number 4 is one that Logan brought up here recently, and that's Staying the Good Speed, baby. I love The Rock. It's my favorite of Bay's movies. That movie is so much fun. It's so dumb, but he's great. And there's so many times I've seen that movie and I just want to yell out, "Cut the chit chat, a-hole." Like I love Nick Cage in that movie, and him and Sean Connery are so great together. And you do have a lot of like heavy lifters with not Ed O'Neill. That'd be a wildly different movie. Ed Harris, but no, him in that movie is so great. I kind of wish it's not in my fantasy booking, but I would have loved to see Nick Cage do a few more Bay movies, like not the Transformers. Let's keep that clear. But like, I would like to see Cage have done a few more of those like late '90s Bay movies for sure, because I love The Rock.
It's hard watching some of those older action movies like Face Off, like The Rock, like Con Air. We those were past for serious action movies back in the '90s, and they are campy and hilarious and awesome. Especially like watching Face Off. Face Off is an incredibly goofy movie, but man, is it fun. Uh, my number 3, it's probably lower on the list than I met because I imagine it shows up. It's Sailor Ripley from Wild at Heart. For the reasons you talked about with Wild at Heart a little while ago, he's an outrageous, interesting character. The way he dresses, his swagger, his story, everything. Love Sailor Ripley from Wild at Heart.
Yeah, we're in agreement again because he's my number 3. There's if you want to see just if you want to see a visual interpretation of just what they call big dick energy, it's Nick Cage as Sailor in that movie. Like, he is just a force in that film, and he is one of those guys you see him, and there's the way he talks and the way he moves. Like, you want to laugh at him, but you're also incredibly terrified by what he might do to you if you laugh. He's just the epitome of badass in that movie. It's so good. It's such a crazy character. And that snakeskin jacket, I love it. Like, I would never wear a snakeskin jacket, but I like knowing that Nick Cage, and their Sailor, I should say, in that movie, rocked the crap out of that snakeskin jacket.
If anyone wants to buy me one, I will absolutely wear a snakeskin jacket, just so all of you will know. So we can start a GoFundMe, or you can just mail me one or whatever, but I would rock that snakeskin jacket. You're right. He can be terrifying in that movie. That part when they're at that party and he just beats that dude on the stairs. I mean, that is a nasty beatdown, that part of the movie. He's a
the moment he's
scary dude.
Yeah, that moment, where he's got the cigarette and he's like pointing at her after he's just bashed that dude's brains in on the steps. Like, it's just like, that's how the movie starts. You're like, holy crap, like, buckle up, because you're going for it.
So my number 2 is H.I. McDonough. Hi, McDonough from Racing Arizona. It's a great character, top to bottom. The physical aspect, just his accent, everything, his wild hair, his Hawaiian shirts, his line delivery. That's one of the ones that really put him on the map, and I just love the character.
Yeah. So my number 2 is one I finally get to bring it up. It's Red Miller from Mandy. He's so great in that movie, whether it's pre the cult where he's just like this almost like big kind of teddy bear of a guy, to when he's, drinking liquid LSD and like killing Cenobites. Like, that movie is just great, and he is great in it. And the scene, of him cleaning his wounds in the bathroom is just next level Cage. He's so wild in that movie. And then it's another one of those movies that's so weird, and you kind of you watch the movie, and you're like, well, I wouldn't think Nick Cage for this movie, and yet there's nobody else can play that part except Nick Cage, which I think is for a lot of these movies. Like even if it's weirdly cast with him being cast in the movie, once you watch, you're like, well, clearly, who else would play that part except Nick Cage? I feel that way for Mandy.
No one else could have played that role like that of Red Miller. I mean, that movie has a chainsaw duel. It's just that part where he's talking to his buddy. He's like, "Pure evil, man." It's just, I love that line. And that's why number one, to no surprise, is Red Miller from Mandy. It packs some of us more subdued. There's some parts where he's more subdued in the beginning of the movie. Then he just cranks it up to 11 and goes for it. Love Red Miller and Mandy. It's my favorite movie of his, my favorite character of his. Yeah, not shocking at all.
So my number one, I was going to go with the character from Pig, but I thought when you think of the best, the Mount Rushmore of Nick Cage, who is your George Washington? And mofo, it's Castor Troy from Face Off, because holy hell. It's that stupid haircut. It's that, his face off. And him having to play both the villain Castor Troy and then turn around and playing John Travolta's character. It's a great performance. It's such a weird movie. I feel like between that and Hard Target, they were just like, hey, John Woo, maybe you don't make American films anymore. But that's a terrible mistake because they're both amazingly weird, and I love Face Off. The fact that they've even jokingly teased the idea of them coming back to do something else together, perhaps the Face Off 2, which sounds terrible, absolutely terrible. But because of those two together and him as Castor Troy, I'll watch it. I don't care. I love it. Yeah, eat a peach for hours. I'm gonna get to the priest scene later, but him as Castor Troy, it's got to be number one.
I think that's a pretty solid pick. I've got to step away for a moment, so I'll be right back in about 1 minute.
Yeah. No, you're good. We'll vamp. So. Yeah, the guns. Oh, that comes up in the new movie. It's so funny. Yeah, I can't recommend that new movie enough. I'm trying to think of some other stuff, some other Nick Cage movies that kind of missed the list. I know you said it earlier. Pay the Ghost. I do like that movie. It really is like an underrated. We'll talk about it here in a little bit. But I kind of like the idea of Cage in horror movies. I think he's got the chops for it. I think if you can find a horror movie that you can kind of work around Cage, I would love to see him kind of. Of course, I love the Nick Cage songs now of stuff like Pig and Unbearable Talent. But if he does have to start doing genre stuff, I want I know some people would say maybe take the Liam Neeson action star route, but I say no. I say you put that man in some horror films, because I think that's where he would rock it. But all right, so now we were just saying that some stuff that missed the mark. Logan had mentioned Pay the Ghost, which is a really good supernatural movie. But I think I just saying that I kind of want to see Nick Cage do more horror.
Yes,
I know,
agreed.
I love the Cage songs right now, but I say step away from the action. Give me some horror. Unless a movie that was real close on my list for underrated, and it's a newer movie, but it's Prisoners of the Ghostland. I watched it on Shudder, and it's this weird kind of Neo Tokyo mixed with Escape from New York. It's a weird hodgepodge movie, kind of like Neil Marshall's Doomsday, where you have Nick Cage and he's got bombs strapped to his balls, and he's got like 2 days to save Bill Moseley's daughter, and there's weird like samurais and stuff. It's nuts, but it is weird. Just like given that stuff, or like Willy's Wonderland, which it wasn't on my list, but just the idea of putting Nick Cage in a non-speaking horror movie where he doesn't talk, that's brilliant. I love that. So we want to do that. So we want to move to craziest Cage characters or moments.
Yep, let's do it.
You did characters, all right, or moment?
I did characters.
Crazy. I went moment.
Okay. No. Why don't you do your whole list, and I'll do my whole list. No, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So
By the way, everyone, this is my fault. I did the wrong thing.
No, you're good. I mean, it all works out because they're mostly just the movies that those scenes are in. All right, so I'll go through my 5 craziest moments. Number 5 is the aforementioned sex scene from Drive Angry, because it's so bizarre and like it's just so unnecessary. But yet it's like the quintessential moment of that movie. It's so like I can't even describe it to you. It's just it's in a movie that has Nick Cage escaping hell, stealing cars, chasing down cult members, drinking beer out of the skulls of his enemies. The weirdest scene is a love scene. That or maybe listening to Tom Atkins say "Tars," but no, it's one of the weirdest scenes. I love it. Number 4 is the movie that when you look at who made it, what it is, it's so weird, and there's a scene in Bad Lieutenant, Port of New Orleans, where because you're like, okay, it's Nick Cage in a Bad Lieutenant sequel that's directed by Werner Herzog. But there's a scene where there's like this shootout in this like coke dealer's office, and they kill the guy because the deal goes bad, and Nick Cage is just standing there like he points at a body, he's like, shoot him again, and the guy's like, he's dead. He's like, no man, I see his soul. And there's just like cocaine flying everywhere. It's so weird. That whole movie is weird. Like I said, the fact that who's in it and who made it, you're like, what? Who lost the bet that was like, yeah, we're going to get Werner Herzog to direct this bizarre direct-to-video sequel to Harvey Keitel's Bad Lieutenant. But check it out because it's a weird movie. 3 for craziest Cage moments is the scene in Kick-Ass. There's 2 of them. One is where you can see Nick Cage shoot a little girl in the chest with the 9mm because we're testing out bulletproof vests. And it's not weird in the context of that film, which is weird overall, but just the visual of watching Nick Cage shoot a small child in the chest. And then the scene where he ends up, spoilers for Kick-Ass, meeting his end, and he's like just screaming while he's burning alive. He's like, honey child! It's so weird because the whole movie he's been doing this pretty spot on Adam West impersonation. The burning alive scene, like he's been doing this great Adam West voice as Big Daddy, and then in his final throws while he's like encouraging his daughter to continue the fight, he's just doing this weird over the top screaming. It's so weird. In a movie that was weird enough on its own. I almost got Wicker Man. We talked about him punching women a lot in that movie, so it didn't make the list. Number 2 is Vampire's Kiss, because we haven't talked about Vampire's Kiss all night. Um, and there's a lot of scenes in that movie, but the one to me is it's the scene with his therapist where he is screaming about his secretary can't find the file, and he just screams the alphabet at the poor actress. And because if you haven't seen Vampire's Kiss, it's so weird and dark. I remember it always came on a 2-pack DVD with the one with Jim Carrey, The First Bitten, which is kind of goofy little sex comedy, with early, pre-Ace Ventura Jim Carrey. But then you watch Vampire's Kiss, you're like, this movie is really dark. But that's the one where you get the Nick Cage face, and that was really kind of the birth of the Nick Cage meme as that movie. So definitely, you can pick any one, but the one where he just shouts the ABCs in its entirety at his therapist is my number 2. And the number 1 is, we talked about the original. We didn't talk about the sequel. It is better than the original, but it does have my number 1 craziest Cage moment, and that is Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. And we all know what I'm talking about because it's scratching at the door, baby. It is scratching at the door. It's in a wild movie where you see Ghost Rider piss flames. His delivery of those lines is absolutely amazing. And it's pure Cage crazy, and it's my favorite of all of his crazy freak out moments.
That's why I like Spirit of Vengeance better. It's not a great movie, but they just unleashed him and they just ran with it. That part where he gets shot in the mouth with a MAC-10 that pukes the bullets back out on him. You're right though. That moment's that's high up there. So, due to miscommunication on my part, I did craziest Cage characters, of which there are many to choose from, and you could look through any one of these movies and find a lot of crazy Cage moments. Shockingly, and the only time it appears as anything other than number 1 on my list is Red Miller from Mandy. I've talked enough about it. Chainsaw duels, battle axes, drugs, cults. Watch it. It's great. His character's bonkers. Number 4 is very much a bit role. It's so incredibly brief, but it was so random and hilarious. I had to throw it on the list. And that's Fu Manchu from Werewolf Women of the SS from the Grindhouse trailer. That's so out of nowhere. And man, I want to see that movie. I really want to see Werewolf Women of the SS. And that just came so far out of right field. I never saw that coming. Fu Man as the evil, he's basically like a version of the Mandarin or what's that one from Flash Gordon? Ming the Merciless. Really random cameo, and that's what it amounts to. Yeah, that's what it amounts to is cameo, but that's one stuck with me. Number 3 is, we've talked about it, Edward Malice from The Wicker Man. Running around in bear costumes, getting attacked by bees, and punching a lot of women and screaming a lot. And they should have just tried to make that a comedy because that's how it comes across, but that's a really manic Nick Cage performance. Number 2, and I feel the agreement, if not number 1, again, you could mix up these orders, and that's Castor Troy from Face Off. It's just that part where he's dressed as a priest at the beginning, his facial expressions, that scene at the party where he's really high on drugs, it is out there. And playing 2 different characters, it is a wild ride with Nicolas Cage, and he steals that movie in my opinion. Castor Troy, craziest characters. Number 1, you mentioned, we haven't mentioned this movie thus far. To me, this almost has to be the number 1 of his craziest characters, and that's Peter Lowe from Vampire's Kiss. That's the movie where we really got the full-blown Nicolas Cage, the first full-blown Nicolas Cage performance. It is such a wild movie, and he chews every bit of scenery up and goes for it. The craziest performance. It's also one of his earliest ones, and there's a lot of contention there, but in my book, it's got to be Vampire's Kiss. So, with that, we moved on to fantasy booking, and this was a tough one because there was a lot of things I wouldn't mind seeing him in. So, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start. This is kind of the most basic thing. But I feel like I don't know if he would ever do it. It's what I kind of want to see him. Like I said, I want to see him step into horror films, which we'll get to a little bit. But the idea of Nicolas Cage in like a Breaking Bad-esque show, like kind of what that did for Bryan Cranston, or something, like something like a maybe not a True Detective, but just something that kind of thrusts him into the zeitgeist, but allows him to kind of reinvent himself in this well-written, well-acted world. I think with television now, I think he'd be great at it. If you could give him something on the level of Breaking Bad, I think it would be absolutely fantastic. Just something that he could sink his teeth into. Something that would give you those Cage moments when needed, but also just show all you have this one body of work that would show all those types he can do. I think would be interesting, and also just to have him to do a long format series like that would be interesting to see.
I can't say that has ever occurred to me, but I think a role like that would really be perfect for his acting style. And I'd love to see him on something more long form like that. And hopefully someday we will. My number 5 is, again, probably low-hanging fruit. I just always thought he would be good in this role. And I'm not sure at what point, which movie or whatever it would be in, but I always thought Nicolas Cage would make a good Joker. I know we've been kind of inundated with Joker stuff, but I think his personality and style I think he could do a good version of the Joker. This is probably more, if this had been in the 80s or 90s, maybe early 2000s, I think that ship has sailed. But I think he could have done quite well in that role.
Yeah, I know there was talk forever, like he was was it Schumacher's in his third Batman? He wanted Cage to play the Scarecrow, which would be interesting too. Yeah, I've got some Batman casting coming up. So my number 4 is horror. We talked about him being in horror movies, but specifically, like the A24-esque horror. Movies like Hereditary, working with directors like Ty West with his new movie X, or Ari Aster, or even a movie like It Comes at Night, which isn't the horror movie you expect, but something that, again, it's about the writing. It's about him being able to give us a performance that we haven't seen before. And I think under that A24 banner, with what they release as their horror films, I think it would be really cool to see him take on some of those movies with some of these up and coming horror directors who are absolutely crushing it, and how they do these types of new, I hate the term elevated horror, but something along those lines of movies like that.
Now that you mentioned it, I do remember there being talks about him being a Scarecrow, and I think he would have made an excellent Scarecrow. I'm not sure how it would have translated in the Schumacher-verse, but I think he would have done that well. Honestly, he probably would have made a better Scarecrow than Joker, but I said, I don't think we've seen him in enough comic book movies, which is why I would have liked to have seen his version of Superman. If I'm not mistaken, it was Superman Lives, the project that was in active development back in the 90s. I'm just really curious how that would have turned out. bizarre choice for Clark Kent and Superman, but from what I've seen and what I've heard, I would have loved to have seen that.
Have you ever watched the documentary about the making and death of that movie?
I have not.
The Death of Superman Lives, I think.
Yes.
Dude,
I have not seen that.
They talk about his. Yeah, no, I watched. They talk about how he was going. His description of Clark Kent is that, because you think of Clark Kent, you think of the nerd, the Christopher Reeves type, but they talk about like kind of what he wanted his version of Clark to be, and it was like basically like kind of like a weird like early 90s stand-up comic, like a Mickey Mouse t-shirt tucked into like a pair of khaki pants and like a blazer, like a weird kind of goofy looking dude who you would never think to be Superman. And yeah, that documentary, you watch that documentary and you're just like, oh, what, this should have happened. Why didn't this happen? So it is a very angry watch because you just watch what probably could have been amazing just collapse under its own weight. My number 3 is selfish because I don't think it'll happen. Even though they got me, there was a rumor of that that he said wasn't true, so we'll find out. But it's not only another Lynch movie, but I want to see Nick Cage do another Lynch movie. I don't think we'll get one. Like I said, there was rumors that Lynch had like filmed a movie in secret and it was going to premiere at Cannes, and he was like, no. But I would like to see him do something. Maybe not. I don't think it would be something big like, Mulholland Drive or A Lost Empire, but something almost kind of like in the vein of Inland Empire, but with Nicolas Cage. Because he proved with Twin Peaks Return, even though that third season is like almost nothing compared to the original, he showed that he can still craft film. And so I would like to see them team up for one more project.
I knew this would be an interesting section here just because there's like everything you're saying pretty much has never even came to mind, but when you talk about it, I could really see that. I would love to see him in another David Lynch movie. I think that could be really excellent. I'm with you. Probably not going to happen, but we can always hope. Number 3 is, I'll explain this. I love older pro wrestling. I'm looking forward to that. I love old pro wrestling. I grew up watching it with my dad, and I have appreciation for it now. And it's kind of had a resurgence of interest with like Dark Side of the Ring and whatnot. I was trying to think of what role he could play, and I don't think he's quite a perfect fit for a variety of roles. I know one was The Undertaker. That was one they talked about him. That would be tough just due to the massive size difference between those two, because The Undertaker is a huge guy. But if you could do some camera tricks, I think it could be done. But when I look at Nicolas Cage with his receding hairline, I can just kind of imagine him with a skullet, a balding mullet, and a creeper mustache, and playing Jake the Snake Roberts. Because just like I could see him pulling off that look and doing a really wacky performance as like an older Jake the Snake, like when he was going through a real rough time in the late 90s and early 2000s. I don't know. I could just see that being a pretty damn great movie and probably unintentionally funny. But in looking and researching this, I found out that apparently Nicolas Cage was in talks to be in Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler as Randy the Ram Robinson. I think that would have turned into a much different movie. I think you could have done well in that role because I think he could do a past his prime pro wrestler well, but I don't think that movie would have been the same without Mickey Rourke. But I'd like to see him try to do a pro wrestler, and I think the Jake the Snake or a character like that could be funny and entertaining in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's yeah, yeah, that oh. Because I was thinking, what wrestler are you gonna go with? But Jake the Snake fits, and to see him play that would, because I love Jake. Jake the Snake was one of my favorites because everybody was just like always cocaine screaming, and then Jake would come in and be like, "Hey man, let me tell you what's gonna go down. I've got Damien in the bag there, and it's gonna be great." So yeah, it did like almost do like a biopic of Jake the Snake, like Resurrection of Jake the Snake, and have him like play that, and then play like the valleys and stuff. That sounds awesome. I would totally watch the crap out of that.
Yes.
Okay, this one, my number two. Once this came together, like I couldn't stop thinking about it. So we're in the midst of another Stephen King assance. I'm totally looking forward to Firestarter. Firestarter looks great. I am sad we didn't get the revival movie, but I think there's some other stuff that's in the works too. I'm down for all of those. But if I'm going to put Nick Cage, Salem's Lot's coming. So I'm thinking, what Stephen King property could you put Nick Cage in and it just be incredible? And my pick is The Dark Half. To see Nick Cage play both Thad Beaumont and George Stark. I love the '90s one with Timothy Hutton. You know, it's a really speaking of underrated movies. That's a Romero one, but I would like to see Nick Cage take on a Stephen King property. And I think the one to do that, or have him play Reverend Jacobs in a revival movie. But I would love to see him take on both Thad Beaumont and George Stark, and let's remake The Dark Half.
That's another one that I couldn't have come up with that on my own, but I think he'd be a perfect choice. I love The Dark Half. I think it's an incredibly underrated horror movie. I think it's Timothy Hutton's great in it, but I would love to see them do a little different spin on it. I think Nicolas Cage would be great as Thad Beaumont. It's interesting you mentioned that playing two roles that'll come into play shortly, but my number two is kind of an unusual one, and it's one I don't think a lot of people uh, would quite connect with. I don't think a lot of people would even know the character at all. But there's a DC character I've loved, and I think he was done really well in Justice League Unlimited, and I think Cage has the right energy. I think he'd be great as DC Detective The Question. I don't know how familiar you are with The Question. He's this kind of dressed like an old-timey detective, but he wears this mask that completely obscures his face, so it's like it's blank. But he's also kind of crazy and into conspiracy theories and just really out there. If you want a good rendition of him, watch Justice League Unlimited, where he's voiced by I can't remember who he's voiced by. We met him at the convention. Took a picture with him. Jeffrey Combs. That's it. Yes, Jeffrey Combs. It's another one I don't think in a million years we'd see a movie about The Question. But even if he was just showed up in a movie as The Question, I think he's pitch perfect for that role.
Yeah, like hell yeah, like almost like I can see it like it would have had to have been the early '90s, but like a Dark Man Sam Raimi as Question movie. Like, give me that.
Yes.
So my number one is it's a simple, like you said, low hanging fruit. I know if you saw the interview they were doing at I don't know if it was at South by Southwest or Austin, wherever they were at, and they were asking Nick Cage about the Batman, and of course in pure Nick Cage fashion, he's like, "Well, I want to play Egghead." And like the weird Vincent Price character from the Batman '66 show, he's like, "I got a real dark take on Egghead. I think it'd be great, so I want to do that." So I don't necessarily want to see him play. I mean, I would want to see him play Egghead. But if we're gonna fantasy book Nick Cage into the new Batman, I know he's kind of the newest of the characters, but if we're gonna do the character, let's go all out and let's have Nick Cage play Professor Pig. Like just this weird opera loving, especially if you played Arkham Knight. He's just this weird like opera. He's a weird like cosmologist surgeon, very Dead Ringersy, who like cuts up people and for imperfections. He wants to create the perfect person, and he wears a pig mask and oinks out of a nervous tick. And he's literally terrifying in that game. So to have Nick Cage, if you're gonna play Nick Cage in the Batman world, give him something big like Professor Pig. If we're doing it, let's do it.
I can fully get behind that. It's one of the scariest characters from that game series. Extremely creepy, and yeah, he would nail that role. My number one is kind of it's another one. I kind of thought of it out of nowhere, but back in the early 70s, while Elvis was doing a lot of drugs, he decided he wanted to meet Richard Nixon. So he got on a plane and went and met Richard Nixon, and he became an honorary member of the DEA or something to that effect. It was a bizarre encounter. There's a movie made about it I'd never seen, but I would love to see a movie about that encounter when Elvis met Nixon, because I think it could be really entertaining. The question is which role he could play. And I think the answer to that's obvious. He can play both Nixon and Elvis. You look at him, you can make him up as Nixon or Elvis, and to see them playing such completely different characters, so completely polar opposite in so many ways, I would love to do that. I think he could pull it off. Playing Elvis as corked out of his mind on drugs, and Richard Nixon as being sweaty and kind of sleazy and stuff. Yes, give me that movie. Again, it'll never be made, but I really want to see him playing both those roles in the same movie. Yes, that's the thing.
I haven't
you
seen
can
that
see
movie.
it though.
Oh no, you totally see it, and it looks amazing. I haven't seen that movie either. I know is it like Michael Shannon plays Elvis or something like that? I want to say, like it's a weird.
I think it's older than that. I want to say it's from the 80s or 90s. I can't remember. I remember reading about it, but it was not a very big movie when it came out. And maybe there's another one I don't know about.
Yeah.
But I just, Nicolas Cage, I was thinking, who could play Richard Nixon in a movie? Because Anthony Hopkins did. But like Nicolas Cage now, he really kind of looks like them. And Nicolas Cage having all this Elvis memorabilia, it kind of organically came together. That is the Nicolas Cage movie I want to see.
I agree. I'm gonna. Oh man. All right, so I'm gonna get to some here. Yeah, Logan said Nick Cage and Josh Brolin together. That would be good. He actually have them in a movie together with the director of Bone Tomahawk. Man, woo-wee. I haven't seen all of his movies, but I saw Bone Tomahawk and what's the one with Vince Vaughn where he like dismantles a car in anger? Is it Brawl in Cell Block 19? Like that would be
Brawl in Cell Block 99.
Put those two. 99, not 19. Yeah. Yeah, 99. I like. Yeah. I don't know what you would put him and Brolin in together.
I've seen Brawl.
I would be down for that.
I've seen Dragged Across Concrete and Brawl in Cell Block 99, and I can't remember that director's name, who also did Bone Tomahawk, but those were excellent movies. They feel like the kind of movies Quentin Tarantino would do. They have that similar feel, but they still feel unique all themselves. They're both very much slow burn movies, but they are excellent. I mean, excellent.
Yeah, Bone Tomahawk, man, that's a whoo. That is a, especially if you love horror westerns. But man, that movie is, whew, buckle up. That movie is rough. Honestly, I think I'd like to see him do that guy, but the other director who did he did Blue Ruin and The Green Room and Netflix's adaptation of Holds Dark. Do something like, especially maybe not quite like Green Room, but one of those movies, or maybe it's Zafke Brothers movies, where it's one of those movies where you're just not breathing for 45 minutes because of the anxiety that the movie puts you in. Like you just can't, you just sit here and shake through the whole thing because you're so anxious about what's going to happen. That could be fun.
I've not seen Blue Ruin. I heard that's a really dark and depressing movie. I got to give it a watch. I loved Green Room, so I could see him getting involved with that director, and I could be dynamite. Also, rest in peace, Anton Yelkin. You were missed, man. What a talented guy, gone too soon.
Yeah, he is. That movie is. Whew. I remember telling Amber watched it. I was like, I was like, she hasn't watched it yet, but I'm like, man, you watched that movie, and you just like, number one, it's the only thing that's ever gonna make you hate Patrick Stewart. Besides apparently Picard season 2, but like, man, Anton Yelchin was so good in that movie. That's another actor we could talk about, like who was just in stuff that nobody talks about. Even that Fright Night remake, I love. He's great in it. He's not the same Charlie Brewster, but I think that movie is. I think it's because of the 3D aspect of it, but indeed off topic, but
I've loved the original Fright Night. I think the Fright Night remake that's how a remake should be. Well done, homage to the original, but does its own thing too. I think that's one of the better horror remakes. So, well, I know we're about to lose some more people here, but we should probably get wrapped up. Anything else you want to say?
yeah. No, I mean, just this was fun. Like the minute you kind of brought this up, my brain started turning. I was like, this could be fun. And then last night I was actually like writing out my list and was like, this is really fun. So I think I like the idea of, like, if we talked about doing the Doctor Strange, kind of like we did Batman. We'll see, like, if it's a movie that either we both really, I don't know if it bears a whole live stream about it. But if not, I would do this again. I like the idea of doing the format, and again, getting your guys' picks and stuff. I know we talked about doing like forgotten horror films of the 90s, which is a genre that I hold near and dear because that was our bread and butter in high school. That's the stuff we grew up on, whether it's the mainstream stuff or like just weird horror movies, good and bad. So I would be down for that stuff. So, yeah, you'll have to let us know. Because, like I said, you pick a topic, and I'm pretty sure Nick and I could come up with a few ideas on list making. And then tomorrow, just a shameless plug, I watched The Northman today. So I'll have my review up on that. And it was, whoo! Spoilers for the 4 of you that are still watching. It's pretty darn good.
Speaking of plugs, if you want to hear more of Jason's take on Nicolas Cage movies, there are some on this page, and you should go back and check out. I know you did The Unbearable Weight of Awesome Talent and Wild at Heart in the recent past. So, yeah, check those out. And I think this was due, and I look forward to doing a bunch of these lists. And, yeah, I'm open to suggestions. I've got a piece out of here. Yeah. I really appreciate you all who joined us. I enjoyed it as always, my friend, and I look forward to doing many more of
Yeah.
these. Thank you all for getting involved. We'll keep on doing these and keep on getting more people involved. I had a lot of fun making this list and showed these various lists, and I got a lot of movies I need to watch and a lot of movies I need to rewatch. So, but
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage, I mean, somebody who we've grown up with. We're both in our late 30s now, or well, mid to late 30s, and it's just he's played such an iconic role, so many iconic roles in us growing up. So I'm really glad we got to do this. But goodbye from the Pacific Northwest. I will see you all soon. Have fun at work, Logan. Bye.